I'm visiting with my good friend, trial attorney Larry Wiedemann, to continue our discussion about concussions, particularly as they occur in sports. So, Larry, let's talk about concussions. Many people confuse concussion injuries with what's called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorders. Why don't you draw us or paint us a picture of the difference between concussions and PTSD injuries?
Well, concussion is a physical injury to the brain. The brain is in a skull of bone, and it's a soft tissue. And when you hit or have an accident, in an automobile accident, your brain moves forward, hits the skull, and it can cause trauma to the skull, sometimes serious trauma. That's a physical injury. Yeah, the brain. Yeah. It's a physical injury to the brain. Post-traumatic stress disorder, in its generic term, is where someone is exposed to a life-threatening event. They're in a near-death experience.
Or what they perceive to be what might be near-death.
That's correct. You're in an elevator that drops 2 floors. Something that causes you to be frightened, and you can develop symptomology which is primarily emotional. But I believe that at times you can have a combination. Say a soldier in a combat is near an explosion that maybe causes a concussion. But also, because he's in a near-death experience, he has emotional reaction, post-traumatic stress disorder. So it could be a combination, but generally speaking, they're two separate things.
So post-traumatic, there's a trauma. It's a traumatic event which causes emotional and or psychological impact on the person.
Correct.
You are in fear for your life or your safety, or maybe for the life and safety of people around you, and it causes a real emotional, traumatic effect on you, and it has a lingering effect, and it can be lifelong, and it could require psychiatric care, psychological care, therapy. And then the concussion injury is there's a physical trauma. Concussion, like a percussion instrument, is a drum, boom, 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 boom. That physical impact, a bomb can cause a concussion, even if the shock wave of the bomb, it reverberates through the brain, and it causes impact on that jello-like flesh of the brain, hitting against the hard shell of the skull. And physiologically, you can have injury to the brain. The symptoms of the two sometimes can be very similar, where you have emotional symptoms that result from the physical harm to the structures of the brain. Is that a fair statement?
That's right. For instance, I had a friend, and I won't mention his name, he's deceased now, but he was in Korea, and in a foxhole and with 10 other fellas, and a shell exploded in the foxhole. Everybody was killed but him. Now, he had physical injury, serious physical injury. He had been an athlete. He had trouble walking, but he also developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and he was never the same person, because the emotional aspect was almost as severe or equally severe as the physical injury.
Well, nowadays, in fact, many people, we're aware about how prevalent, from the show that we just recorded, Power of Attorney, so many sports players are injured physically on the field from concussions. Many are sidelined, as many as a third, up to 50%. But we see so many members of the military who are sidelined from bombs exploding, physically not only taking limbs, but also physically causing concussions, causing brain injuries. Some of them, many have post-traumatic stress disorder, but many of them have concussion injuries that limit them and prevent them from being able to live normal lives. And we see that all over the newspapers, and we see more suicides than ever in the history of our military. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think that's because a life-threatening incident, and it happens to a large percentage of people. They get emotionally affected, but a lot of them have physical injuries that if you get a brain injury from a concussion, it can cause problems, mechanical problems, inability to sleep, think, speak.
On that note, medically, and you in your personal injury practice and I in my personal injury practice, a lot of times if someone gets a concussion from, or even post-traumatic stress, we have to medically demonstrate the injuries to a judge or a jury. Medically, why don't you talk about medically what medicine is out there to show how the harm occurred, to prove that it's a concussion injury or a post-traumatic stress injury? What medicine and medical diagnostic equipment and science is out there to demonstrate these injuries?
Well, from a post-concussion injury that has not produced permanent brain damage is not diagnosed by any X-ray or MRI because the brain has been rattled, but it hasn't been damaged. That is, it may be damaged electrically, but not physically, so that it may not show on a test. It comes from symptomology. Okay. Post-traumatic, post-concussion syndrome can last for a lengthy period of time. That people have headaches, they have visual problems, they have perception problems, and so that's a physical injury, but it's not diagnosed by an X-ray or an MRI.
So things that take images of the brain, science is not yet to the point where you can point to it on an image. You have to diagnose it by doing examinations, testing, where the person describes what they're seeing, what they're feeling. They're doing testing to arrive at that conclusion. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, your history of the injury, how it happened, and then the symptomology. And the effects are the diagnostic tools. Okay. Whereas post-traumatic stress disorder can be diagnosed by psychological testing, by psychiatric analysis, and to determine that a person in fact has PTSD.
Okay. So that's different ways of diagnosing PTSD and concussion injuries.
Right.
Treatment that you've seen in your practice, and I agree with you, by the way, with that testing. The treatment that you've seen for both of those, can you comment on that?
Well, for post-traumatic stress disorder, you would generally get anti-anxiety medication, sleep producing medication, and psychiatric management.
Different types of therapy.
Yeah, and whereas in concussion syndrome, generally it's similar in the treatment modality, but and there are medications. If you have a concussion that causes some type of brain injury, then that can be diagnosed and treated. Yeah.
If it's a serious brain injury, you might require surgery if there's a bleed in the brain or fluid buildup in the brain. But if it's mild, then it might just require medicine or just keeping a watchful eye.
Right. That's it, yeah.
Right. We're just about out of time. If you believe that your child or a loved one has suffered a concussion, what's the advice?
Well, first of all, I think if you know that your child has suffered a concussion, that you would have to know what it was. Was he rendered unconscious? Was he dazed for a period of time? And then if he's involved in contact sports, he should be withdrawn from the sport for a period of time until you make sure that there's no other symptomology. Sometimes a concussion, they'll throw up, they dizzy, but you have to watch somebody and withdraw them from anything that can aggravate that.
Okay. But if a child or even a grown-up, they got their bell rung, could have been in sports, could have been in a car accident, obviously play it safe, get them to a doctor, report, make sure the ambulance driver, the ambulance EMT, make sure whatever medical person you see knows that this person was knocked unconscious or was dazed and confused after hitting their head or after being in the accident or in the sports accident. So that medical person knows to have the doctor, the physician, whoever the medical person is, address that because it could be a very serious injury. Fair
Yes,
statement?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Larry, thank you so much for joining me on this segment, and we hope to have you back again real soon to talk about more safety and including get an update from you, more safety concerns, but also get an update on that lawsuit of yours, and we wish you good luck.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Okay, enjoy.
That's it, folks. We'll see you again, hopefully on another segment very soon.